Hey, Bobby Manning here, live from TD Garden with Josue Pavon.
What up, Bobby?
We're back. It's been a minute, and it's the same old Celtics, 101-92, another loss for this team. Listen,
some things don't change, Bobby. That's just what we're dealing with this season.
They leaned in on three-point shooting. I believe they took 46 of their 90 shots from three. Did it to the pace of 1 of 13 shooting between the second and third quarters, I believe, and never got away from it late. They hit some late. They got back into the game after trailing by 14, but the Hornets executed, hit big shots when they needed to, hit a ton of threes. I believe Terry Rozier had 6, scored 28 points. He and LaMelo Ball both have 10 assists. And that's the story of the game there, I felt like, was the settling. Jason Tatum, 0 of 7 from 3. Good looks, driving kicks were quality throughout the game, but they just kept leaning on something that wouldn't work again and again until late.
Yeah, and Bobby, it was unfortunate because they were able to string together so many defensive stops.
With the zone, yeah.
Right, with the zone, and then you come out of that timeout, it's a 6-point game. And then Terry Rozier makes you pay, And Jalen talked about that after the game, that step-back three that's so hard to defend and that, he did everything he could. Those are the shots that Jalen said you want them to take, and the Hornets were making them. But at the same time, you want to see the Celtics respond. I thought there were certain instances throughout the fourth quarter where you saw guys open. I remember Al Horford being open a couple of times, and then he converts a three down the stretch. And I felt like Tatum and Brown were doing their best to sort of take things over and incorporate their teammates. But at the same time, offensively, I just thought the execution just wasn't there, especially down the stretch. Again, you get those 3 consecutive stops, stops that you really need, but you ran out of time to sort of run your offense and try to find the flow that you needed, to essentially come back. There were always a couple plays short where you were thinking they were going to at least tie the game or come closer to it, but it was always a 2-possession game or worse.
And the effort, the intention, it's all there. We've been saying this stuff over and over again. Jaylen Brown even got on the ball late and made a bunch of plays when the 3 started falling. Grant had a big one. Al had 2 down the stretch, I believe, that got them right there. But in the end, they break down defensively on a few different plays here or there, and they just don't have the shooters to play this way, to shoot this many threes. Ime's fine with it. He wants to see them eventually start hitting these and believe in the process, especially Tatum and Brown as playmakers. But can you do secondary drives? We saw them do that against Chicago. Get downhill, start doing more things in the lane. I know that they don't have the big men to score down there if you just throw the ball to them, and they don't have the best finishers in the world outside of Schroeder, Brown, and Tatum, but you have to try something different if you go on a 1 of 13 spell from 3 in the middle of a game, and they never really did.
Yeah, Ime said it best. You want to see Tatum go downhill more often, right? Especially when you're 0 for 7 from 3. He's had this approach, or at least not approach, I should say, but these results pretty much throughout the course of the regular season, right? I mean, let's face it, he's not having a good shooting year.
He's the worst shooter at his volume in the East, B-Rob tweeted after the game.
That's telling in itself. So you have to switch things up a bit, and I thought going downhill was a big part of that. Now, the foul trouble, okay, maybe that plays a part. He got into foul trouble early. He was up to his 5th foul in that fourth quarter, so maybe that played a part. But at the same time, we want to see him go downhill more and try to get to the free throw line. And I just thought that the Celtics, they were going to rely on him, that fourth quarter, and he was unable to do it. Now, look, I mentioned Al Horford earlier because I thought there were a couple of stretches where he could have gotten him the ball, especially Jaylen Brown. There was one open 3-pointer in the corner. He eventually did get that open shot, and then there was one in the paint where I thought that was a good opportunity for them to sort of get a high percentage look, and I just thought they ignored it because they were looking for the threes. They were looking to match the Charlotte Hornets' energy offensively, and of course they were unable to do that. But also they sort of had blinders on, right, Bobby? They were like high percentage opportunities, I thought that, or at least matchups that you saw the constant switching from the Charlotte Hornets, and you saw some favorable matchups for Tatum to be more aggressive and to fly past his defender. And I thought that he sort of, took the shots more than trying to create offensively, off the dribble.
The misses got into his head. The foul trouble did too. We saw him stand on the baseline for the whole second quarter stretch after he picked up his third, yelling at the officials and everything else, even in the timeout. So all the stuff that we saw early in the year from him reared its head, and it's just becoming a bad shooting season for him. It really is. I don't know if he'll get out of it. I don't know what the main factor in is. Is it fatigue? Is it the crowds he's drawing around the rim? I mean, a lot of these threes that he's shooting are open. Ime said 5 or 6 out of the 7 were wide open, and that one late in the corner certainly was there. not much more to say here. They missed shots again. There was big news in Celtics land. We'll get to that in just a second here. But, of course, support our sponsors here on the Garden Report and CLNS Media that help us get down to Washington like we will be on Sunday. Com.com/garden. Go over there, get a 40% subscription. Help ease you down after your losses like this. And there have been more than a handful of them this year. And LinkedIn.com, in this turbulent labor market, you got to get your job out to the right candidates, not just candidates in general, the right candidates. And there are millions, hundreds of millions up there on LinkedIn, and they're going to let you post your job for free. Just go to linkedin.com/garden. That's linkedin.com/garden. Just 13 players on the Celtics bench tonight because they did trade Juancho Hernángomez, his $7 million salary, to cut their luxury bill in half and really get them within an inch of getting under the luxury tax here.
Killing me, Bobby. You know how I feel about the structure of the deal I had in place for Buddy Hield.
Oh, you had Juancho in there.
I did. He's a big chunk of that because of obviously for matching salary. And I don't think it's gonna happen, Bobby.
This is what this could preclude them from stacking salaries.
That's the shooter I wanted. Sorry, go ahead.
The only way they could have really improved this deadline was stacking salaries, maybe throwing in some picks and getting in on one of those shooters. Not really in the cards now because your biggest salary that was expendable, an expiring contract at $7 million, and Juancho just effectively got dumped here. Now, there were some benefits to this. They didn't have to give up anything to move the contract, which they probably would have in a normal circumstance. And they get back two guys that they have rights to, and Bol Bol, who's hurt, out 8 to 12 weeks of a foot injury here. Maybe you see him by the end of the year, maybe you don't. And PJ Dozier, who was a two-way player for the Celtics in 2019, and has really carved out a nice bench role with the Nuggets before he tore his ACL in November. Yeah. So he won't be back till next November. Who knows if he's here next year? Effectively two guys that don't matter this year, but it's a little bit of a bonus to dumping a contract, whereas you're usually giving up something to dump a contract.
Yeah, plus you have guys, two players that you just mentioned that, you have their bird rights, you can sort of control them a bit in terms of their destiny. Maybe you see something you like from one of the guys, and maybe you part ways with the other. But this is sort of like, to me, this feels like the last few years of Danny Ainge, right? Where he wasn't like Trader Danny. He was more like get under the tax apron Danny, And I think they
haven't been over the tax in 3 years now as they get under it here. I mean, there's no repeater threat.
Yeah, I feel like Brad took a page out of that notebook, and he's running with it. You also have to think about Jaylen Brown. He's probably most likely, he doesn't make the All-Star team, doesn't reach those, get those incentives that his contract promises for him. So that's also in the card too. That also helps them, keep them underneath the tax bracket.
Yeah, and it's a great move if you live in this world of they need to get under the tax. Listen, that's a restriction that they've placed upon themselves, whether it's ownership or whoever up above is making that decision there, and it's dictating what they're doing going forward here. For them to make this move so far out ahead of the deadline, it's obviously a product of the opportunity that was there. Denver was trying to move Bol and get a guy like Bryn Forbes, but at the same time, I don't know why it's a victory for them to get into the tax. There was a lot of flag waving on Twitter and everywhere else over how shrewdly they did this when all they really accomplished was bookkeeping. Yeah. I mean, this doesn't do anything for a team that needs some shakeup here. And obviously the Athletic report alluded to how much they could potentially be doing here in terms of shaking up this roster.
Well, they're keeping themselves busy, right? I mean, Brad talked about his phones are constantly ringing, and 98.5 was like, "Are you sure? Because what's going on? Where's the big deal? Where's the big trade?" And I think the Celtics are in a tough spot because you look at the weapons that they have, or the pieces rather, and they're not as appealing as you look at other teams across the league. Young players that are on favorable contracts and producing, showing you that they've already carved out a role. I mean, you look at the guys throughout this the Ime rotation, and yeah, you have a blend of a couple of veteran guys, but your young guys haven't really held on to a roster spot, or not a roster spot, but a rotation spot. Yeah. Outside of maybe Grant Williams is that one guy who's he's showing some improvement off of his second season, but outside of that, I think that's what puts the Celtics in a really tough spot. And moving forward, you have to figure out which one of these pieces you want to keep. So it's hard to go to, you're thinking about the trade deadline, and you're thinking about guys like Marcus being mentioned. Do you part ways with Marcus right now? Are you still hoping he's going to eventually turn into the point guard of the future or the near future? I mean, I think that's a question that the Celtics still haven't they don't have a full answer.
And you don't know how much he can get for him either, frankly. You know, they could float him more than they have in the past.
Let's face it. We've had this conversation about Marcus in the past and how much of his value has significantly gone up between now and, I don't know, last year's trade deadline.
I don't think it's gone up.
I don't think it has either. So what changes for the Celtics? Because we had the same conversation a year ago, you know, and of course that was a different team, but I just think the pieces in terms of the assets.
The desperation, right? I mean, they're in a tough spot right now.
The desperation is there, Bobby, but at the same time, the pieces haven't really improved, you know?
Yeah. No, certainly. They might have gotten worse because these are big contracts they're trying to move in Smarts now,
Not everyone
as well as
wants
Horford's.
those deals. Right.
Yeah, so you're sending out salary that isn't all that valuable, maybe picks that aren't all that valuable, and maybe they did just look at this deadline and say, there isn't going to be anything here, so let's just do this early and get it over with, and maybe selectively sell if they can get some good stuff for some of these guys. But it does feel like the beginning of the end of any hope of buying and improving at this deadline and kicking many of those things down the road. Now, did they have to get into the tax? No repeater threat. Not really even a big bill at $8 million coming in there yesterday. But they still decided to make that choice, and that just sort of shows you where these Celtics are at in terms of competition and contending right now. They're a long way to go. Yeah. If you could see them do anything at the deadline, I still want to see them getting that shooter because I think it's going to help Brown and Tatum trust this process of playmaking a little bit more, even if it's a cheap shooter at this point. Is anything you have your eyes on, or is it just kind of get what you can for a few rotation guys?
I mean, one name that I just feel like he's not gonna still be in Orlando after the trade deadline is
Terrence Ross?
Terrence Ross, right. I just drew it a blank. Terrence Ross. That's one guy who I think maybe the Celtics can sort of, you know, in terms of guys that would make an immediate, you know, would make an immediate impact, and especially when it comes to them addressing, you know, how poorly they've been, you know, from behind the arc. So I think that's one move I still sort of have my eye on, but we'll see. I mean, we still have a few weeks ahead of us, so we'll wait and see, or at least a couple. But yeah, that's one guy.
Let me dream big. Jeremy Grant. It's a dream, but that's the kind of guy I would send out multiple picks for, and that's obviously what Detroit's looking at. Bleacher Report did say the Celtics are one of the teams pursuing Grant this deadline, as they did last year. So
they should. But
he'd be a perfect fit. A lot of competition for him and others, though. We'll have continued coverage with the weeks leading up to the deadline here as the news starts to heat up. For now, Celtics are back here on the Garden floor against the Trailblazers on Friday, 7:30, before we're off to Washington. Stay tuned. CLNS Media, Celtics All Access for these kind of videos, as well as the podcast versions of the postgame show and this program here. And of course, go to clnsmedia.com for articles and everything else that we're offering, as well as some Patriots postmortem. So go check that out. Thanks, Josue, for being here.
Absolutely.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back. Celtics lose 101-92.